Happy Saturday, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 3WALLBALL Outdoor Championships. My name is Todd Boss. We are live, getting started as our first match of the day. And what you're looking at is not racquetball. What you're looking at is paddleball. This is pro paddleball semis. Number one seeds, Daniel De La Rosa and Alvaro Beltran, who, in addition to being quite adept at the stringed sport, are pretty much adept at this discipline as well. In fact, the defending champs in this event. They are playing two players from Southern California. On the left, you have Cesar Chavez, and on the right, you have Carlos Mercado. So we're just underway. Going to get my bearings here. We have a busy Saturday lined up for you. This is our opener. After this, we're going to have a couple of pro semis. Men's pro semis singles matches, which is always fun, especially on these big courts. Before, a little bit later in the afternoon, we hit up the big men's pro doubles semifinals. So lots of action here this Saturday for your viewing pleasure. While we're standing here for your listening pleasure, I've commandeered the legendary one and only Brian Pineda, who's going to help me commentate this match. Brian, good morning.
Good morning. I'm hanging out with the boss, and I think it's a little loose that you say legend only in my own head, so you must be written space in there.
Well, you know, you do live in Las Vegas, so you're the legendary Las Vegasan.
I love it.
Las Vegian?
Let's run with that. Nope.
Las Vegan?
Oof.
No.
Clearly not vegan.
So tell me what you tell me what you know about. We all know who De La Rosa and Beltran are. Tell me a little bit about the fellas that they're playing for our fans at home.
So it's Cesar, I believe, is relatively new to the sport. However, Victor and I actually played this team yesterday as an opportunity to face off here against De La Rosa and Beltran. So they play regularly. They played very well yesterday. Cesar was just a shock. I'd never seen him play before. And he plays so within himself. And he's got his own shots. He's a very much an offensive player. Carlos will look to keep things in, but he does have his certain shots he likes to take. This should be a one-sided affair today. I mean, once again, it doesn't matter what sport. This could be the World Championships of underwater basket weaving, and De La Rosa and Beltran will still be pulling out tricks and athleticism at the top level.
I agree. So paddleball is an interesting sport. For those of you who don't know, racquetball essentially evolved from what we're looking at on the screen right here. It eventually evolved from paddleball. The very first champions of our discipline, of our sport, Charlie Brumfeld, Steve Surratt, Dr. Bud, players like this, they all were, prior to racquetball, they were all champion paddleball players. Correct,
and I would even respectfully throw Bo Keeley into that mix as well. A good friend of mine who I believe he was going to try to make the event, and I'm sure you may have heard his name before, Richie Wagner.
Oh, sure.
There's been other greats along the way as well. You have Kelly Jailhouse, who's played one of the greatest. Obviously, let's talk about the greatest to ever play the game is actually in the draw this year. Emmett Coe, and I know we just talked about a very elite class, right, of players that we know both in and out of paddleball and racquetball. But I think every single one of them who's made the trip down to the PPA down in San Diego will tell you hands down Emmett Coe is the best thing that paddleball's ever seen.
Sure. Emmett has a number of both singles and doubles national titles in paddleball. Also here this weekend is Aaron Embry.
Yes, I mean probably the biggest contributing factor to paddleball. And that's great hustle right there from Cesar. Good rally.
And Alvaro's given his opponents a tour of the court there.
Right. Tour de Concha, I think is what they call it in Mexico.
You know, I was looking up for doing some research on, on some of our ooh, there goes that ball. I hope that doesn't hit somebody in the head. Some names that are familiar to racquetball fans who grew up in the 90s watching pro racquetball are also quite adept at the sport. I'm thinking of guys like Dale Valentine, Chris Crowther, players like that.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I mean to interrupt. I got all excited when you said the crippler. I mean, I remember one time I walked into a match and I'm thinking, Emmett and I had massed a couple national, or actually at the time one championship, a couple world championships, and I'm thinking, I'm the guy because I'm playing with the guy. And, I mean, Crowther just about walloped him. I mean, this isn't a game you traditionally associate with power. But once again, here's Chris with one of the gifts that he brought to the game that very few are in the same class of power the way Chris Crowther was.
Mm-hmm.
And he just throttled me on the court.
Yeah.
Now, there'll be some names that maybe you haven't heard of, but one name you definitely have heard of to throw in that mix as far as, why you have such a great champion and what's made the sport great with Emmett Co. is the name of Todd Entrican.
Oh, sure.
So Todd was another singles winner. And, oh, my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. There's another guy out of New Mexico. I think Caesar was actually his name, and I can't think of his last. I think it might have been Cesar Chavez. But they would go back and forth. But Todd was just the guy out of Riverside. And so there you have Steve Lerner's out there and Kelly Jailhouse, and you have the Cripplers out there and all these great guys, Dale Valentine, obviously, and a lot of great. What's cool about the Riverside group as well is they had a good contingency of amateur players. And in this sport, you might play at different levels come tournament time, but what's cool in paddleball is they all mix it up, and it was really made famous down in Sorrento Valley where John Brumfield would run that club down there, and Aaron Embry would bring tournaments in, and you had everyone from kids to women to boys to men to people of all different walks of life that were playing together, and they would just switch courts. It was just a beautiful thing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned PPA.
Yeah.
So tell me what PPA stands for and what it's about.
So PPA stands for, and I hate that you threw me in the spot, but I believe it is the People's Paddleball Association, I think is what it is.
Pacific Paddleball Association or People's?
Maybe it is Pacific.
I
gave my best right hook right there.
It could be either, knowing Charlie, king of all racket sports. But go on. PPA.
Yeah. So PPA. So what's cool is, and I want to say it's one of the biggest benefactors of the sport. Len Sonnenberg. I believe he took over property. So back in the 60s, I think it was established, 64. Don't quote me on that. Charlie would know those years better than me. But Dr. Bud and Charlie and all these guys get together, and I believe Len was the one who purchased the property. And what it is, it sits on top of a hill where Qualcomm Stadium's at. So this property then would have this stairway down. It's honestly, if you're a racquetball or paddleball enthusiast, it is something to be sought after to go down there to schedule a time, hit up Emmett Co. And just be like, hey, we're in town, we want the experience. Because that's what it is. You're walking into a nostalgic court that's been played on since I want to say 64 is the number coming out to me right now. And
you can look it up on Google Maps.
Okay.
You can look at Google Maps. You can see kind of how it's situated. It's essentially, as you said, it's kind of down the hill behind a house. And I've seen pictures of the inside as they've done. And it's really cool. It does look like a complete throwback to like the late 60s. The inside of it's dark wood, and and there's all these all these pictures. It's almost like you're walking into a cigar bar in some respects.
It feels that way. So like you said, you walk in, you have the first place you can stop is the above seating where you'd watch from the Eagle's Nest. Maybe 20 people can watch from up there, and then if you walk all the way down to the bottom, you have all the lockers that are set up. And I mean, you're going to have, like you said, the Surratts, and you're going to have Charlie and Emmett and everyone who's made the journey down there that was a part of putting the PPA together. Dr. Bud, obviously, and the Rhino. I forget his name's not coming to my head, but I'm gonna give him a shout out. He knows I'm talking about him, but
the Rhino.
Welcome to Charlie Brumfield's world. Everyone gets a nickname. God,
we need more nicknames in our sport. The New York. I love the New York guys that all have these great nicknames, right?
I mean, I gave Peaches. Is that?
We could do Peaches.
We can do Peaches, yeah, for Mania and Riffle.
Sure.
But yeah, you're right. The New Yorkers have all these things. You have Robert the Iceman Sostry, and
you got William the Warrior.
William the Warrior.
Also here you have Dave Talek. I believe Dave Talek is here.
Okay.
I've seen Hulkster, Hulkamania.
Okay.
You got Mikey D, who's been doing some broadcasting with us.
What's cool is I didn't even throw this name out here, but this is also a good ambassador of our sport that a lot of players, including like Greg Solis, and I was talking with Greg Solis and John Dunn, they modeled their game after this guy who is playing with them at Co, Todd O'Neill.
Sure. I haven't seen Todd yet this weekend.
Oh, great shot.
But I had dinner with him last year. And then, of course, we hung out after the tournament down in the sports bar here at the Strat.
Oh, cool.
But I haven't seen him yet this year.
So Todd came in last night. I did get a chance to see him, and we did have a good time in that sports bar last year.
Anytime you get a bunch of guys from the that played the tour in the '90s, you end up with stories.
Straight facts. Want to send a big shout out to my friend Michael Orr. We haven't seen him in a little bit, but a great talk about belly rolls for days. I know he's watching, and
Pittsburgh's finest.
Pittsburgh's finest out there with Jimmy Emiliani.
Maybe not quite as good as Obremski, but maybe Pittsburgh's number 2. I don't think Orr would argue with that.
And just to kind of clue it back to this match here, I think De La Rosa and Beltran, they're having a good time out there.
Yeah.
Nothing too impressive, but I mean, that's by their standards. It is impressive what they do out there.
First time I ever saw Michael Orr, he came over to I believe it was Baltimore for a regionals. Because back then you had to play regionals to play nationals.
Nice shot.
And the closest regionals to Pittsburgh, instead of going to Ohio, where Ganem usually ran regionals, a lot of Pennsylvania guys would come to Baltimore. So he gets onto a court, and if you ever were at that old Baltimore security club, front wall, side wall glass, back to back.
Oh wow!
With a huge open area where you could stand on the second floor, or you could sit on the bleachers. And I remember seeing Orr get in the box to serve. I'd never seen him play before, and he has this cadence on his drive serve where he kind of looks up, off to the side, and then he looks back down, and then he blasts a ball at a pace that only a few people in the sport could hit it at. And back then, open played one serve, and he was just a dominant figure. He eventually left the East Coast, relocated to Southern California, where I believe he's been ever since.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it real with you. I would easily, without a doubt, there's been so many good power players, and obviously my time is limited since 2004 of playing the sport. But I would easily put Mike Orr as a top 10 all-time most powerful serve I've ever seen. You know what I mean? And so we're talking about we're talking obviously Kane, right? We're talking Cliff Swain. We're talking Sudsy. We're talking Tim Doyle. You know what I mean? We're talking. There's a guy, I don't know if many of you remember. He's from Coach Alabama, Shane Woodson, I believe is his last name, or Shane Woods.
Shane Wood.
There it is.
How about Egan? He's a guy.
Egan was someone I never saw, but I have to because he's clocked the hardest ever. And then let's keep it real. During my time, you have Mitch Williams. You know what I mean? Chris Crowther. I mean, there's some names. Even Mike Green, when he got on a roll, the way he could hit to the left side crack is what it was. And Tim Doyle does it great in doubles, but
Doyle was amazing. So, Mitch Williams, I'd love to get him back in the sport at some point, but I think he shredded his shoulder. Mitch is the hardest guy I was ever on a court with playing.
Okay.
I played him. I got matched up with him against regionals one year, and it was like a 1v16 match in the regionals. And so we were scheduled to play, and of course Mitch is the 1 seed, so they wanted to save us to put us on the show court at regionals, and I'm like, dude, let's just get this over with. So we go into a back court. He just does nothing but lob serve in the first game. Kills me. In the second game, he's like, all right, boss, I'm going to work on my drive serve a little bit. Oh, okay, sure. Hits his first drive serve up the right-hand side. I'm not within 10 feet of it. I'm like, oh, my. Later that tournament, I got him on a gun. It's the fastest I ever personally witnessed on a gun, and I had him at 162, I believe the number was.
I think that's what it was. And as you're talking here, I don't even know how these names escape me. So, and we've only seen him as an outdoor titan, but this guy could just compete. Craig Lane is one of the hardest hitters I've ever seen, and obviously Jeff Conine.
Yep. Back in the day, Solis could really put a power into the ball.
Oh, boy.
He's kind of.
There's a lot of guys that pop, but we're you know what I mean, not to take away from Greg because you're right, but we're talking about some acceleration on the serve. I mean, I would say the next echelon I would put Sleece there. Obviously, I would put Croft there. I mean, hardest forehand one of the hardest forehands I've ever seen in my life.
Back in the one time, the first time I ever went to Nationals in Houston, saw a fellow by the name of Brian Fredenberg.
Oh, from Texas.
Oh my,
Big Bry.
Oh my God. So
that's a heavy ball.
So,
that's not just a hard. That's a heavy ball.
So, I was I'd never heard of him, and so I'm walking around, and you just hear, if you remember the old Houston YMCA where they held it, the echoes. You kind of were in this common area, and there was courts kind of all spread around, and you would just hear these explosions from players, and so you kind of wander over, and you're watching this guy warm up. So I'm watching him from the back, right? It was a glass back wall, and he had a big hat on. He wore like a trucker hat when he played, and he gets up to serve, and he goes to hit his serve, and I thought that he skipped the serve, like the ball, the optics.
Oh yeah.
I thought that he skipped the serving.
Right.
And I was like, oh, wow, you don't see that very often. And they're like, ace, point.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, my God, what did I just see? He hit the ball so hard that my eyes couldn't focus on the ball path. And I was having, like, optics, like optical illusions played. I've never seen anything like it.
So what happens in this sport, and to talk about what you're saying, is that the ball can move so fast. When we talk about these elite hitters, and I think the first person I ever saw do this was Craig Lane, a.k.a. talk about nicknames, Clubber. And what happens is they hit so hard that the air particles literally cannot move out of the way fast enough, so the ball thus begins a curve. And that's what's outstanding about it.
I'm looking up, since we're talking about this is one of my favorite topics ever.
Love we're talking racquetball during Paddleball.
Yeah, well,
Right, we're giving content here.
Here's another name for you, Brian Baker. Does that name ring a bell?
Brian Baker.
So Brian Baker.
Where's he from?
I'm not sure where he's from, but
hold on, I'm going to give a shout to Orr. Who?
But we had a conversation back on the old 40x20 forum about this exact topic, like who was the fastest ever, because we hear a lot of hyperbole about, so and so was measured at 200 miles an hour, and I don't buy that.
I think it's Egan at 189 was the fastest clock.
But 189, Fredenberg 191, Brian Baker claimed that he was at 192. And I can't remember where or what the context was, but other people up in that same range, Scott Reef had some high temperatures. Tim Sweeney put up charge into it. And then in the 2002 U.S. Open, Brent Walters told me this one time. They had a radar gun competition out there. Fredenberg got measured at 171. Walters got measured at 170. Mitch at 168, Kane at 164.
Who, Walters? Are you talking about his brother?
No, Brent Walters.
Brent Walters? Yeah, so and his brother is
Jordan.
Jordan, thank you. So JW I'm familiar with. That's what I was picturing when you said Walters at first.
Yeah. So Brent and Mitch were both North Carolina guys.
Yep.
Good buddies. They would often play doubles together, and they grew up together, kind of neck and neck. And both of them could really put a charge into it.
Oh yeah, I mean you had that little quick. So you had you had Chris Crowther, you had the Walter brothers, and there's a gentleman, I can't think of his name either, but they were just. It just reminds me of Tom Petty's song where it's like those Indiana boys on those Indiana nights. Like that's just who they were when they traveled. You know what I mean? Just good old-fashioned boys there to just throw some heat and drink some beers. You know what I mean? It was a vibe. It was very much East Coast kind of vibe way, and I like that about him because it brought the fun. It brought the nostalgia of perhaps 80s and 90s racquetball.
Oh, 100%. 100%. So I feel bad. We should probably go back and actually pay attention to what we're watching here.
So,
our
back to Paddleball.
Our mic ref is broken, so I have no idea what the score is. Oh, I like that shot, though.
So I know Game 2 ended with De La Rosa and Beltran winning. And this is what's interesting about this sport. Just any fan, this is not part of the VIP package. You just get in there and just stop a professional paddleball match, and there that is.
I guess that was it. Well, good thing we paid attention at the end.
Yeah, that was great. I think great history lesson. Welcome to Racquetball 101, the history of racquetball.
Absolutely. In our next iteration, we'll talk about controversy on the Pro Tour and and the split between NRC and IRA.
Sure.
We'll have like a whole series here.
Let's go. Let's run it.
Because I believe our next up match after this should be a men's pro singles. Well, although if you can see on your screen, the fellow in the blue is our purser, so to speak. He's the fellow that puts on the matches. We also have our producer here pointing us out and telling us what we're going to see next. Indeed, we've got a men's pro singles match coming up next.
And this is a good one. So before we cut to a break, what's coming up here is men's professional singles of racquetball here at the 2022 3WALLBALL World Championships presented by Procanics. We have Andres Acuna and Javier Mar. Javier really making, I think, one of the last stops we've seen him. Made an incredible run. I believe this was before the Golden State. What was that? Where did he make that great run?
They were in Maryland. I was
Maryland.
I was there broadcasting that.
That's right.
Watched his match. He took out the. He was the 16 seed. Took out the 1 seed, Andre Perea.
And no doubt having
final.
Yes, and no doubt having the best year of his entire career, Andres Acuna.
Oh, 100%.
World champion. Was it
World Games champion?
World Games. That's what it was. World Games champion. He is the national champion for winning the World Championships outdoors. So he's done it singles indoor. He's done it outdoor. I go as far as saying he's probably the national champion in his home country.
Yeah, 100% there.
And obviously top RT Pro. So this is he's on and up. You got Javier who's on and up. They're very familiar. They're indoor players taken to the outdoor game, so it should be evenly balanced. Before we cut to a break, Todd, who are you picking?
I'm going to go with Mar there. Acuna's the 1 seed, but I've always been a Mar fan. I love his game. He's smooth. He's athletic. He's powerful. He's got great hands. Andre's game, I've always thought of him as being just Mr. Consistency. He's in tip-top shape. He doesn't miss shots. But for me, the difference is Mar makes shots, and that's what I think is going to happen here.
Awesome. Well, if they're not having me rough that, I will be back on the mic with you, Todd.
Excellent.
Otherwise, I'll send it back to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for watching this. This is 2022 3WALLBALL National Championship.